So recently in the community, there's been a bit of a controversy about Blaze hog tags. This all happened on the DBD forums. Somebody posted a wee thing saying when our hog tag's going to be addressed, and then after a bit of arguing back and forth from people in the forums, one of the mods said to stop arguments here. We know the hog tag's a thing, and we're working on removing it basically. And then people start to freak out. A lot of Blight players are like, "No, please don't." A lot of people are like, "Please do." And then some people are like, you know, the opinions of one mod don't really reflect the whole company, which is kind of true. But looking at Behavior's track record, uh, they're more than likely going to remove the hug tag because I mean, look at JFlix. Somebody sort of started mentioning them. People called it an exploit, stuff like that, and then eventually they got removed. So I'm gonna sort of go over my case of why I think hog tags should stay in the game and try and debunk a few common arguments that people use to, go against keeping it in the game. So first of all, let me just explain what the hog tag actually is for people that don't know it and how it works and how it's done. So the hog tag is literally just when a blight slams into an object, they use the slam duration to walk in and then press against whatever wall they're facing. And then when they look down or up and initiate a rush, they will slide off the object instead of colliding with it, allowing them to go around. The way this works is Blight's collision box can't really, collide with an object if you're already touching it. You know, the way Blight collides with an object is that he slams into it, and if you're touching the object, you can't slam into the object technically, can you? And the way Behavior tried to counter this was by making it so you can't initiate a rush when you're looking at a wall. But the way the hit detection works when they changed it that one time is it's sort of where you're looking is where you will slam. So if you're looking at the ground, you technically have space to rush. And even though your body's touching the wall, it will allow you to rush, which lets you slide off the object. So that's how the hug tech works and how it's done. It's not very hard to do, for a lot of people, say that it's also a very skillful mechanic. Anyone can hug tech. You can literally learn it in 20 seconds. The way I just explained it to you, go try in a match. When you collide against the wall, just walk up to the wall, look down, and then initiate rush, and you will slide off it. It doesn't work on anything. It used to be a lot stronger. It feels like one time they sort of changed Blight's collision, and hug tech stopped working on a lot of things, especially those Macmillan loops. They used to work in those box loops all the time, and now they don't really work at all. So it's mostly used for things like Dungeons, Shack, just rocks, flat loops, stuff like that. Now I'm going to show you like some examples of, when you would use a hug tech in a game. This is sort of like a setting up hug tech. This is where I use the hug tech to set up a hit by allowing me to rush much earlier. You can see here, I hug tech off this car, allowing me to get a much earlier rush, which lets me hit her before she gets around the corner. This next hug tag is going to be a corrective hug tag. It's basically just using the hug tag to correct a mistake. So you can see her action like bounced twice, but I hug tag off this, which allows me to catch the Claudette. And then in the last clip here, I'm just going to use a hug tag to get into a better position. So you can see here I bounce off the frame and use the hug tag here to get me inside the shack, which allows me to set up a hit here. So now I'm going to go over some arguments. The first argument I'm going to cover is that the hug tag has no counterplay. A lot of people say, it removes counterplay that Blight has. Well, that's not true at all. Hug tags actually very easily countered. I'm actually going to go over 3 of those clips again and tell you how each of those survivors could have avoided being hit in all those scenarios. So in this first clip here, the Kia could have actually pretty damn easily countered me by simply just having good reaction times. As a Blight player, you have to have very good reaction times, and to counter Blight, you also have to have very good reaction times. What she should have did here is when she reached this point and sees me rush off this, she should have just immediately ran to the pallet and vaulted it. This would have completely avoided this hit, because if she vaulted the pallet when she saw me start to rush, she knows I can't attack on my first rush, and then she would have been on the other side of the pallet and in a safe spot. In this clip, basically all that Claudette had to do was stay behind the counter. She just had to have a bit more situational awareness and then see what I was doing. Now, you can see here that Claudette leaves the loop, but in reality, she should have just stayed behind that counter and she would have been fine and able to react to any hug tags. But instead, she decided to actually leave the counter, which just left her open for a hit. And in this last clip, granted, this would have been very hard for the Jane to counter, but if she had a lot of situational awareness and game sense, she should have actually counted my rushes, because I was on my last rush here, and if she was smart, she would have known I had to force a flick around this corner, and she could have very easily avoided the hit if she just kept running instead of volleying. because my flick wouldn't have reached that far, but since you vaulted the window, it allowed me to actually get a hit. So those are examples of how the survivor would have countered the hog tag in each of those scenarios. But let's just go over a general counter, which is leaving the loop. If you literally leave a loop on a blight who's trying to hog tag, you will literally win 90% of the time, because the survivor has to look down to initiate a hog tag. Here you're going to see a very good example of that. You can see her, I'm going to choose this Fang, I get a nice hit on her here, once again. She's going to counter the hog tag you're going to see here. So I get a hit on her, and now she's going to run to a loop. You can see my power tokens are still recharging, and this Fang now knows I'm going to set up a hog tag because I'm keeping her at the loop, and then now I'm going to try and do the hog tag. And I completely missed because she's left the loop and I didn't see her. Why did I not see her? Because I have to look down to do a hog tag. And I actually I'm betting on the fact that she's A, going to stay at the loop, and B, she's going to be in the side that I think she's going to be around. You can either leave the loop, step around the blight's flick, because once again, he can't look up, or he can't look straight when he's, doing this hog tag, so he can't actually tell where you are. That's the main counterplay of the hog tag, is basically just not doing what the blight thinks you're going to do. And, that's the obvious counterplay. In those other three scenarios, the survivors could have just put themselves in better positions. So I feel like everything I've just said here sort of debunks the whole, it has no counterplay, because it definitely does. In a few situations, it might not, in a few very specific situations. But the majority of the time, most of the time, you can counter the hog tag fairly easily. And then the next argument that's mostly used is that it's an exploit and should just be removed. This one's somewhat fair enough. At the end of the day, it's behavior's game. If they say it's an exploit, I want to remove it. Fair, like, they can do that if they want. But then you also have to be consistent with it. There's a lot of exploits in the game at the minute that people just kind of brush off that aren't exploits. And Blight's hog tag technically it's a soft exploit. And a soft exploit, what I mean by that is something like hog tag or window tag. Hog tag, you're just, utilizing the fact that Blight's collision works this way, and it's working as intended, and you're just utilizing that. Window tag, you're just utilizing the fact that the killer's hitbox, sort of works in a weird way when they vault, allowing you to pass through them. These are soft exploits. A hard exploit would be like, when Blood Pact and Object of Obsession were bugged, and then you exploit these bugged perks, which aren't supposed to work this way, to gain wall hacks. Or the Breakdown bug, where it permanently removed the hook, you're exploiting the perk to gain an advantage. A bug. But hog tag isn't a bug, it's just more of a loophole, and that's the way I see it. But even then, it's still technically an exploit. But like I said, you have to be consistent. If you're going to remove hog tag, you also have to remove all the other exploits in the game, which includes window tags, 360s, and other things. There's loads of exploits. Hell, Billy's curving is probably an exploit. It just sort of says, where do you draw the line? If you're going to remove hog tag because it's an exploit, you got to remove the other exploits. And if you don't consider all those things an exploit, then you have to clearly define what an exploit is. So I think I've sort of gathered enough points here and covered them, as to why I think the hog tag should stay. And I think if you want the hog tag removed, you got to have a good reason for it, and you have to be consistent with your reasoning, because if you call an exploit but don't want other exploits removed, then you're just being hypocritical and biased. And if you say it's no counterplay, well, then you're just probably wrong, and you need to start looking at other ways on how to counter killers. At the end of the day, I think hog tag is just a really fun mechanic. I see barely anyone complaining about it anyway. Most of the time, even average survivor mains, most of the time say they don't mind hog tag and they think it's fine. A lot of blight players, just say it's a fun mechanic. It just adds depth to the killer. And I agree. I think if you're removing hog tag, at the end of the day, you're just removing fun. You're just making the game less and less fun every day by removing these things. So that's going to be the end of this. I hope that I have convinced a lot of people. If you see people arguing in forums or anything like that about hog tag, please send them this video, because I think I've covered everything that needs to be covered when it comes to the hog tag. We've covered exploits, we've covered counterplay, stuff like that. So hopefully hog tag doesn't get removed. I hope it doesn't, but if it does, it's just going to make Blight a lot less fun to play and a bit weaker. So that's going to be the end of this one. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video or something.